Thanks very much, Catherine.
Thanks very much,
Hi, everyone. I like Canadian cheese, but anyway.
I do too, but
I really do.
berry.
I like European cheese too, but I mean, who's kidding? My name is Stuart Trew. I'm the trade campaigner with the Council of Canadians, and we are, for those who know who we are, we were born out of the free trade debate, mid to late 1980s. We're a national social justice citizens advocacy organization. We have volunteer chapter activists across the country who do the work, who do a lot of our work based on our ideas of what we think are fair, just policies when it comes to the environment, when it comes to trade, when it comes to healthcare, other things. Very strong supporters of public services. And so we have come at the trade issues since the Free Trade Agreement of 1988, since NAFTA. And yes, we still oppose these free trade agreements today, like we did back then. And we think, in fact, if you look at the past 20 years in an honest way, we think there's more reasons today to oppose these kinds of deals like CETA than there was perhaps back in 1988. In terms of the impact on the three countries in NAFTA, I know this is a talk about CETA, but I think we do have to address the elephant in the room, which is NAFTA, which is in this year in its 20th anniversary. There's been a lot of commentary we've seen in the news over the the holiday season. We'll see it all year. It's a very, very mixed impact that this free trade agreement has had on the whole continent. People have been saying that the biggest winner was, in fact, Mexico, which I find hard to believe when you look at poverty is essentially the exact same place it was at 20 years ago. It's about half of Mexicans are in dire poverty. Wages in Mexico's manufacturing sector continue to, there continues to be downward pressure on wages there. Even to compete with China, right? Like this idea that we're all benefiting from free trade, I think has to be questioned. Even here in Canada, we've seen essentially median incomes stagnate or stay flat over the past 20 years. We've seen a lot of manufacturing jobs leave Canada, leave the United States, obviously, in greater numbers. But it's been a very mixed, and I think it's been a very hard reality, a hard impact on Canadians from those three agreements. So, the Council of Canadians does question the idea of going and doing this again with another major power like the European Union, where trade barriers are already very low into the European market, where Canadian companies are already doing quite well, profiting very handsomely within the European market, and where the benefits are actually considered quite slim. Even by the government's own statistics, they're estimating that the trade deficit with the European Union is going to increase after CETA comes into effect. And that is going to have a displacement effect here in Canada on jobs. So, when we look at this trade deal, we want to look at the impact on Canada. We want to look at the overall agenda behind it, and I'll get into the specifics too in a second about why we're opposed to this Canada-EU trade deal. Actually, let's talk about the specifics now, because I think they're important. So, one, we're not sure that this deal is actually going to produce the benefits the government is estimating. They're talking about $12 billion in GDP growth. This is based on one single study that was done in 2008 that's been since discredited, not just by people who you could consider, on the left, for example, Unifor economist Jim Stanford, who suggested that, in fact, based on the trade deficit that's going to be created by CETA, you're looking at losing between 30,000 and 150,000 jobs. But in fact, people who are very supportive of the CETA have come out with statements saying, yeah, these are probably exaggerated numbers. There was a sustainability impact assessment done of the CETA, done for the European Commission. It took a very similar approach to assessing the benefits of CETA for Canada and the European Union as the joint study did in 2008. The one that the Harvard government's always talking about. And it found that, in fact, at best, we're looking at GDP gains of between a quarter and a half of what the federal government is estimating. So that's, between $3 and $6 billion, which is not actually a lot of money when you think about it. Now, when you take into account what Canada has the policy changes Canada's going to have to make in order to get those gains, you start wondering, well, is it really all that worth it? And so, for example, the Council of Canadians has been working with municipalities across Canada, including Toronto, to say, do you really like this part of the agreement that's going to forbid you from preferring Canadian companies when you spend public money on goods or services or construction? So say you're building a power plant. Do you really want to lose the ability forever to say, well, we would prefer that this bid go to a Canadian or local firm? And say you want to open the bid up to everybody, which I think makes a lot of sense all the time. You don't want to exclude certain companies just because of where they come from. Say you want to say, no matter who wins this contract, we want a portion of the product to be sourced in Canada, right? Minimum local content requirements. They use them successfully in the Green Energy Act to create jobs here. That's illegal as well, right? So, in fact, Toronto Council said this is a problem for us. We like these kinds of incentives to local and small business here in the community, and we don't want to lose that. And so they passed a motion that said, in fact, we would like to be excluded from those rules in the Canada-EU trade deal. And they're one of about 60 municipalities across Canada who have done that. Now, we saw in October, the agreement in principle that the Harper government released and talked about. In fact, municipalities have been included in this deal from what they've been talking about. And so that kind of buy Canadian, buy local option, which of course we see used all the time in the United States, is going to disappear as an option for Canada. So Toronto, just a few miles from the border, is not going to have the same ability to stimulate local growth as, say, Buffalo does or, say, Detroit does. Another element we've been talking about is, and you might have seen this in the news too, is this intellectual property rights chapter. So CETA is not just about trade. Let's, I think Catherine said this well. This is a very big agreement. It includes so many things that go beyond trade, and one of them is intellectual property rights, which includes things like trademarks, things like pharmaceutical patents, copyright terms, this kind of thing. And in fact, to get this deal with Europe, to get, very limited new access for, I would say, certain important, I think politically important, agricultural export sectors, Harper's agreed to make changes to Canada's patent regime, so they're adding an extra 2 years to the length of a patent. And this has been estimated not just by left-leaning organizations like the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, but in fact by the federal government's own numbers. This is estimated to increase health costs in Canada in terms of the money that public health systems pay for drugs, right? and the cost that patients are going to have to pay. It's the CCPA estimates it in the range of about $1 billion, maybe up to $1.6 billion annually, once that patent extension starts to come into play in about a decade from now. So think about that. You're looking at a $3 to $6 billion boost to GDP from CETA at the end of the day, in the best case scenario based on these studies. And you're looking for about a $1.6 billion annual cost to the public system, to the public health system from agreeing to these intellectual property rights changes, which should have been debated, I think, openly and in public before they made those decisions. And I'll just conclude here on the process, because I think this, if we can't agree on the impact of free trade, if we can't agree on the benefits of the deal, I think we should be able to agree on the process. With a deal that includes public spending restrictions, includes patent extension, includes rules for copyright, internet, rules affecting our state-owned enterprises, telecommunications, a whole number of public policy issues that most of us would think should be discussed openly and publicly. I don't think it's fair that you get a cabinet mandate, so you get the Harper cabinet creates its expectations of the deal. That's secret. It goes to the negotiators. They work out a deal based on the secret mandate. Parliament never gets to have any input into that mandate or into the actual agreement. What they get to do at the end of the day is they're slapped with a signed deal. It's a done deal. You can't make any changes, and Parliament's asked to vote yes or no. And that's all the power they have to have any influence on this. So you're faced with a situation where an MP who might not agree with these pharmaceutical rules, who might not agree with the ban on buy local, is nonetheless kind of pressured to say, well, we don't want to say we're anti-trade, so we're going to pass this agreement and it's going to become law, and it's law forever, right? I mean, these are very hard legal documents that are binding on governments, they're binding in perpetuity, and this has all happened with an up-down, yes-no vote in Parliament without any input. And I think that's wrong when we're talking about this kind of deal. If it were about tariffs only, fine. If it were about customs facilitation, making it easier to get your goods as a small business into Europe, I think fine. I'm willing to let the government do that in secret. I'm not willing to let the government make all these other changes in secret. And we only kind of scratch the surface. I'm going to end it there. But just to say that I think there's an extreme democratic deficit in the way the CETA is being proposed to Canada. And it's the same with the TPP and these other mega trade deals we're kind of facing right now. As Catherine said, as countries like Canada and the United States retract or pull themselves away from the WTO, away from multilateralism. And I think we need to, and what we've been trying to do with the Council of Canadians is to kind of increase the volume, create a debate where the federal government's goal is to avoid any debate at all. They don't want to talk about trade, it's good, end of story. We want to raise the volume, and that's why that's what we do at the Council of Canadians, and that's why I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today. So thanks very much.